Hello and welcome back everybody to part 2 of my Kerbal Space Program Let's Play. So jumping right in, I'm going to take that 22 kilometer contract there and I'm going to increase the fuel on our trusty Sounder rocket. The TWR though, I leave at 1.0, so we're just barely going to get by on launch. This flight goes pretty well. We don't encounter any issues with the flight itself. But unfortunately, we're just barely going to miss that 22 kilometer mark. I didn't put quite enough fuel into it to get there. I think we get to about 21 and a half, which is so painful to see. But at least the entire rocket is recovered. So we're not going to lose a whole lot of funds on that, just the cost of fuel, which is pretty cheap. And at least, we learned our lesson on that one. But on the upside, we do get an advantageous landing, which we will see here in just a second. And we get a little bit of science data, too, when we get up to 21 kilometers, because that is considered high above Kerbal. So that's nice. So mucking around with the real shoot settings there, and we come down right in the middle of KSC, which is really nice because you can run around and get a little bit of EVA science from all the different buildings around KSC. So I jump out here, take a little bit of data, store it, jump back in again and start running around to all the different buildings here and storing science. I forget to go back and put my science in the capsule at first. So we get the flagpole, we get R&D. Yeah, it's fine. Then we go and put that back, and then I take a little I'm trying to get the science to stick there, and I think that I have 2 reports from KSC. So I overwrite it, get the one from the Science Center, put it in the capsule, try to go to the astronaut complex, which unfortunately is just considered KSC, so we already had that. Run on over to the Research Development Center, and then finally jump back in, and we're done. So moving on, we have increased the fuel and increased the thrust on our solid booster just a little bit so that we're going to hit that 22 kilometer target. This flight also goes very nice and smooth. These are pretty easy when you've got a pilot in there. If you're just going for these this fund grind with picking up each altitude contract, they're very simple. You just increase the funds or increase the thrust and increase the fuel on each of your launches. So that's nice and easy. Doesn't give you any problems. We are going to hit 22 kilometers this time. We're actually going to go a little bit beyond 22 kilometers, which is cool, but it does make us ineligible for the next baby step up. We kind of blow through at least 1 or 2 of them instead. But yeah, it's not that big of a deal. The launch still goes well. It's not costing us a lot. Like I said, it's only costing us the solid fuel really to get up here, which is why I'm using these solid boosters. In case if I was using a liquid booster, then landings would be a little bit more nail-biting, because a liquid engine and the liquid tanks cost a lot more than just an empty solid shell. So here we are, we're still burning, we're almost to 500 meters per second and 16 kilometers up, so we are definitely going to hit that 22 kilometers, and like I said, we go a fair bit beyond it. 19, 20, engine is still running, 21, 22, yep, it's still going. I turned to the west there just before the engine shuts off, and we made it to 24 kilometers with the engine still running, so we coast all the way up to 46 kilometers. So that took a little bit of fun potential out of our pockets, but that's okay. And we unfortunately nosedive a little bit here, so I keep an eye on the parachute temperature to make sure that it doesn't get too high while it's descending, but we're fine, and deploy the parachute and a nice little landing here in the grasslands to the west of Kerbal, or KSC. And I unfortunately fall onto my face again, so I do a little bit of flopping around to jump out and get that science, which I then realized I already had, so I jump back in. Moving on, this time we are going for the 56 kilometer contract. The design was almost unchanged from the last launch because we practically almost got there on the last one. I increased the fuel a little bit, and I think I increased the thrust a tiny bit. So we have no problems with that. Here we are hitting about the same point we were last time when we had engine cut off, but we're going to keep pushing ahead on this one. 22 kilometers, we're moving 600 meters per second, which is pretty fast. That's why I'm checking temperatures on the nose cone and on the capsule to make sure that we aren't gonna lose either of those on this ascent, but we don't. So we have main engine cut off there a fair bit before our target, but we were going so fast that we coast all the way up beyond our target without a problem. We don't hit space, that's fine. It's not a big deal. It would have been nice. We could have gotten a little science a little bit sooner, but we only exceed our target there by 1.5 kilometers and begin our descent. And I adjust our real shoot parameters once again. And this ship actually is able, at least half the time, to maintain its orientation during descent, which is nice because it puts less stress on the parachute in case it does decide that it wants to burn up due to deadly reentry. Another nice, easy landing, though, in the grasslands to the west of Kerbal Space Center. But that's it for the altitude contract, so it's time to get working on an orbit-capable spacecraft. So I'm going to use some radial stuff here, and I'm going to set it to the redstone paint scheme. I'm going to use an LV909 as our second stage engine. And at first, I'm thinking that I'm going to be able to use a procedural SRB to make a cheap first stage. And I look at it, and it's just, there's no real good way to get the amount of delta V that I need to safely make it into orbit. So I try strapping 2 solids onto the side, but the TWR, even with everything turned way down, is just too high. So it doesn't make sense to do it that way. In addition, having only solids for your first stage makes it a little bit less controllable. You aren't able to fine-tune how much speed you're getting. And I also wanted to add a Science Junior up top, which just makes the delta V problem even worse when I connect that first stage again. So I decided to take a look at a liquid first stage and put it together with 3 solid boosters, and that meets the delta V requirements that we had. The only problem is, of course, that a first stage that's liquid fueled is going to cost a little bit more. So I decide to just, for the heck of it, I take the first stage off, and I decide to try putting a pair of the procedural SRBs on there, and daisy chaining them, or yeah, just like that. To see if that'll get me there, but it still won't get me the delta V requirement, and the cost is only like 1,000 off, and I definitely don't want to do 3 of them. That would be a pain in the butt. So I decided to go back to the liquid stage, a full tank up top, and I think that's pretty much it. I unlock a few parts here just for later, but we don't put them on this rocket. But yeah, so that's going to be Orbiter 1 or O1. I debated calling it Redstone, but I'll just call it O1. And so here we are, ready for launch. We're going to hold that materials base study until we get into orbit, because it's going to give us a lot more science there. We can just launch a capsule with a Science Junior. I start off with that main engine on and quickly turn it off once we hit about 50 meters per second, and let the solids take us the rest of the way until they're spent. I do start a gravity turn pretty early on this one, which is good. I did a little test flight before this with the Kerbal Construction Time Simulator to see how it did, and it turns out that doing an early gravity turn helped a lot. In the last one, I had some difficulty with that. I also tried spinning the rocket to make this separation easier, because I noticed that the boosters like to collide, but it made the flight more uncontrollable, and the explosions don't actually hurt the rocket. We get out unscathed, so we'll call that a bug to fix in a future version of the rocket. But the ascent is, for the most part, pretty nominal. I switch here to the map view and just start watching as we expend that first stage as far as we can. It actually gets us all the way to a 75-kilometer apoapsis before it shuts off. So I go ahead, and once we 77 actually. So go ahead and ditch that and coast a little bit up, and then turn on that second LV or that LV909 stage. I collect our science real quick here, because I'm not 100% confident that I'm going to make it to space, or I'm going to make it to orbit. It's never a guarantee. But it looks like I started burning just a little bit late, and I end up going through apoapsis. So I nose up a little bit to arrest my vertical velocity, get myself going back upwards, and then manage to balance for a good couple of seconds right at apoapsis, which is really fuel efficient, and I was really amazed with that. But we make it into space just fine with enough fuel to lower our periapsis on return, so we're not going to get stranded in space. So that is it. That is our first orbiter. We've got material space science, mystery goo science, and a crew report from low Kerbal orbit, which is awesome. That's going to be a lot of science for us in this early game. And yeah, the flight went flawlessly. I didn't have any complaints about it. And I just take a minute here to just kind of soak it in and enjoy the victory. But the victory can only last so long, so next we are going to start looking at landing. And I was thinking about doing the burn right here, but I decide it's better to wait, swing around to the dark side, and put our periapsis close to the KSC so that A, we land in the daylight, which is prettier, and B, we get a little bit more recovered funds from our Science Junior capsule and the 2 mystery goo containers. So that's what I do. I just time warp a little bit until we're, you know, roughly on the other side of Kerbal, but I don't go for perfection on this. And then point myself retrograde and do a quick little burn. I think I put myself at about 33 kilometer periapsis or so when I shut off the engine. And that's good enough for me, so I come back and I ditch that final stage, leaving us with just the Science Junior and a heat shield underneath the capsule. And it's time to time warp until we are in the atmosphere. I'm going to put us into chase cam because I think that's the nicest way to watch a descent. I did notice that it seemed like there was a weird weight imbalance in the ship. It seemed to want to list to one side, and I'm guessing that I put the mystery goo containers just a tiny bit off center when I was trying to move them inward. So I run most of the descent with SAS turned on and kind of manually adjust the angle there. Normally I just turn it off and let the aerodynamics handle it. But either way, we still have a perfectly nominal descent. Nothing out of the ordinary happens. And we come down for a nice landing. Unfortunately, it's in the grasslands again, so we don't get any more biome science. But parachutes deploy right. They deploy at the right altitude, so we don't have to wait forever. And everything goes smoothly, which is awesome. There we go. I jump out, realize it's the grassland, and recover. So I decide here to take 2 easier contracts. I was considering the visual surveys, but it's just too much of a pain until you have proper airplane parts to try to do those. So I take science data from around Kerbal, and for some reason it offered me launch a new vessel. So I ended up taking that, just since I'm already going to be doing that anyways. I might as well get the free funds and the free science. We are going to be planning to put up a space station in the near future, and I want to put up a communications network. So those are the technologies I'm going to pick here. I take a look around. I'm considering general rocketry. These aren't really useful. I'm not going to need the recyclers. I don't plan on sending anything too far from Kerbal just yet. Same reason there, but I do want the probe core there, and I also would like those plane parts to start doing some visual survey contracts, and I also really want the docking port that MKS and OKS add to the early game. You can unlock it here on only the 3rd or 4th tier. I guess that's the 4th tier, which is much earlier than the regular docking port. So I go ahead and I pick that one, and I pick the unmanned core there, because I need to put up that communications network. But that is it, guys. You'll have to wait and see what happens next time. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.